The beauty of custom cards is it gives the fandom the ability to create their own card designs showcasing potential ideas and how we can improve decks, improve theories, or other potential lists as well. And I've created a series of custom cards for all clans and nations for V Premium and how they can improve decks that are no longer viable. In this video, we'll be introducing my support for Royal Paladin Gancelot, which is one of my favorite decks in card lores that I enjoy within the Cardfight Vanguard fandom. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and without further ado, we will now get started. Now, Solitary Knight Gancelot is a deck that has three solid things going for it to this day. And the first part about that is Blaster and Blaster Blade support are viable with this deck. Having access to cards that can utilize two different Vanguard strategies in the same time is one of the awesome unique aspects of Gancelot, as not only are you getting just grade 3 Royal Paladin support that are viable to this deck, but you're also accessing the full support of another archetype in Vanguard. And that's not something that's very common, as a lot of those archetype based decks are usually reliant on you having a specifically named Vanguard available to you. So having a deck that can utilize two different types of Vanguard supports is super unique. The second thing that Gancelot has going for it is the fact that this game is the consistent mid to late game pressure. The deck is very straightforward and very narrow. You just want to have your Blaster Blade and your full board to do your 3 drive checks, your 3 critical attacks, and that's how you want to win the game. You'll use Force 1 or Force 2 to gain the extra critical or power that you need, depending on the matchup, to just push harder. And because you're doing that consistently every single turn, your opponent always has to watch out for a 3 critical attack, because Blaster Blade is going to get 2, Gancelot has 1, unless they have 4 because of Force 2, and they have to worry about those 3 drive checks because your Blaster Blade counts as a Vanguard with only 1 drive check. That's something that they have to expect every single turn, so therefore you're consistently doing the exact same thing every single turn that they have to deal with. The last thing that Gancelot has going for it is the fact that it is compatible with multiple engines and finishers for the deck. Gancelot, like I stated earlier, can utilize the Blaster Blade support, meaning I would say any Vanguard that utilizes Blaster Blade as another tool or as another finisher is something you can use for the deck. You can use Gancelot with Majesty Lord Blaster, you can use Gancelot with any of the other Alfreds, and those really are the only series of cards that I think you can really use it with that make it work out. For finishers in terms of grade 3, you have access to the Jewel Knight support, which is viable in all Royal Paladin decks. So you can get extra soul charge, you can get some counter charge in there, extra card draw, you can get more bodies on board, you can get units for defense. There's a lot of different ideas in terms of generic Royal Paladin support that you can utilize to make this deck a whole lot better, to improve whatever flaws that you might see in your Gancelot build. Those are the 3 good things that the deck has going for it, but I think we need to discuss some of the 3 negative things that are seriously holding this deck back. The 3 things holding Gancelot back from seeing any success is the first thing is that this deck generates no advantage. Gancelot, while it has a very simple skill, sometimes simplicity isn't the best. The deck does nothing. You give power to your Blaster Blades, you turn your Blaster Blades into Vanguards, and that's as far as it gets. You're not getting extra attacks, you don't generate more cards on the board, and although you generate additional 10,000 power, you don't generate that power in the form of a force marker. And I really wish that Gancelot had a very similar skill to Mordred Phantom because they did come out in the same set, but the fact that you're not generating that extra power in form of a force marker means that your board is always going to be really depowered, as you only have the 1 force marker from your Gancelot to work with. The second disadvantage of this deck is that your second ability, which is your most relevant one, is locked behind the grade 3 or greater clause. Now, in certain Vanguard decks, I do agree that this is necessary so that they don't run down the meta, but I don't feel like Gancelot is one of those cards. Now, I understand that during that time period, it might have seemed like a good idea, but again, keep in mind, this card came out in the same set as Mordred Phantom, so I really don't feel like that's even an excuse on why this card has that clause to slow the deck down. I think that the skill should have been accessible to you during any period of the game, such as the first ability, making your Blast Blades 20k on the rear guard, because Gancelot really needed that in order for the deck to gain that early game pressure and attack power. And while Royal Paladin does have an amazing grade 2 rush game, depending on which deck you're playing, unfortunately, Gancelot does not have access to that, because even if you do that, your grade 3 turn is going to basically be vanilla even with your Blaster Blades. And that really hurts the deck's early game offensive pressure, even going into the mid to late game where the deck really starts to power up a little bit. The third and final problem with Gancelot is just overall everything with the deck. The aggro is too slow, it's also very weak, and it doesn't even support his own win condition. Gancelot generates nothing to support Blaster Blades so it can get that extra critical bonus, which is really where the scary offense comes from. Because even though you have the 2 drive checks with Gancelot, Blaster Blades critical bonus with 1 drive, you're not doing anything else to help the strategy at all. You're not creating board, you don't give Blaster Blade enough power, you're not consistently getting more force markers to make it better even for your other rear guards that they hit. Overall, it's just not a good look for the deck, and it's what really holding Gancelot back. And even with all the new support for Royal Paladin, the deck just needs so much more stuff to make it work. And I feel like when creating this new custom card support, you're going to see and understand how just 3 cards can take this deck from nay to yay. Making his debut in the V-Series, I am introducing to you Young Pegasus Knight, who has the following effect. Auto, when this unit is rode upon, cost, put a card from your hand into Soul and draw a card. Auto, Rearguard Circle, when placed, Soul Charge 1, then choose one of your Vanguards and it gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. Then, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, Soul Charge 1. Young Pegasus Knight is a card that was introduced to us during the early series of Cardfight Vanguard in Season 1. He was a Royal Paladin grade 1 unit that had the ability to gain 3,000 power whenever you put a card from your deck or field into Soul. This allowed him to work well with Soul Saber Dragon as you were soul charging to get other power-ups during your turn prior to that, and it also worked out with the Barkgall strategy of putting cards such as Marin, Future Knight Lu, so you can superior ride into Blaster Blade. It gave you an early game rush and was a nice little power-up card for whatever sort of soul charging strategy you were going for back in the day. While designing this card, I wanted to keep its core elements that made this card good back in the day. Young Pegasus Knight was a Soul Saber Dragon support card, and I wanted to be able to help out those decks that can do that. One of the biggest issues in a lot of these Royal Paladin decks earlier in the days was the fact that they're very reliant on having certain pieces in the Soul via Alfred, Blaster Blade, or just a general grade 3 to get all of their effects off. So Young Pegasus' Knight first ability is for all Royal Paladin decks. It makes everything so much better. Having that skill to put any card you want from your hand into your Soul and draw a card means that you could potentially speed up any of your turn 4 strategies into your turn 3, automatically going into your first grade 3. That second skill is just a natural callback to its first ability supporting Soul Saber Dragon. I understand this is a Gancelot video, but as you guys know, Soul Saber Dragon is one of my favorite decks, and I've had plenty of videos on it on my channel, and I've made plenty of Instagram posts of it on the Prime Vanguard page. I really do love that deck, and I wanted Young Pegasus Knight to be able to help out any Royal Paladin deck in terms of resources, as that's what the card used to be for. I changed it from powering up to now improving our resources, as I feel like that's where always Royal Paladin has been lacking is good resource management, and I wanted this card to fix that issue. And while it isn't a complete fix, having that ability to Soul Charge 1, then gain another Soul Charger on grade 3, it sets up your Soul Saber Dragons, it gives you extra soul for your Blaster Blades in the early game. You can power up your Blaster Blade with additional 5k, and Blaster Blade will be relevant because it is a Gancelot video, and it does so many other applications as well. Central Vanguard strategies in the Royal Paladin clan are now going to be improved a lot better, and they're going to move a lot faster thanks to the full effect of Young Pegasus Knight. Now this next one is actually a pretty special one, as this card was released within the Japanese meta, but not the English meta. So making his English debut as well as his V Premium debut, I am now introducing to you guys Blue Flame Knight DINAS, who has the following effect. Auto, when this unit is rode upon by a grade 3 unit with Gancelot in its card name, cost, discard a card from your hand. Call this card to Rearguard Circle, get an imaginary gift force, and put that marker on your Vanguard Circle. Auto, Rearguard Circle, when this unit attacks a Vanguard, choose one of your Vanguards and it gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. To me, after playing Gancelot for as long as I have, one of its biggest problems is that that deck is very slow and it does not do much. So Gancelot requires you to have a lot of power to make your Blaster Blade stronger, and it also wants you to be able to push with that deck in the mid to late game because you can't unlock its effect until your opponent's at grade 3, which means that at that point you're going to need setup pieces to make your turns actually scary with the additional critical and drive check. And because we're using Blaster Blade as our win condition, or to get Blaster Blade's extra critical, you need 4 rear guards to gain that bonus, and with him being a Vanguard, he cannot count himself. Which means that when you go into the Gancelot to get full benefit of all your cards, you're going to need a full board that all do something relevant to your strategy. And Blue Flame Knight DINAS does all of that. The first effect was actually taken from Metalborg Lion and Nutter, which is a V promo card for the Metalborg deck in Dimension Police. The addition of another force marker will help this deck out so much. It makes your Blaster Blade scary, it makes your Gancelot scary, and also it just accelerates the deck a lot faster so that it moves better. The Superior Calling this card to the rear guard is just another body on board that will now make getting those other pieces you need in the field for your Blaster Blade a lot more consistent as well. That second ability to apply 5,000 power to a Vanguard when it attacks was a skill that I had to revamp a lot because of, cost and wording. But that came from Schneisel from the D series actually when I was designing this card. I wanted Blue Flame Knight DINAS to be able to do something that supported the Gancelot strategy entirely, as the deck needs all the support it can get. So having the attack effect to give 5k to one of your Vanguards means that depending on your attack pattern, you can swing with your Blaster Blade, swing with your DINAS because stand triggers don't exist, and you can apply all your pressure onto your Gancelot depending if you choose to go Force 1 or Force 2. And I definitely wanted this deck to have as many options as possible, and I think that because DINAS already moves itself onto the rear guard and can apply extra pressure throughout any period in the game, as long as your Vanguard is Gancelot and you're getting the additional force marker, it definitely gives the deck a turn 1 speed up. Same thing with Young Pegasus Knight. This card gives the deck another turn 1 speed up, as I'm going to introduce the final card for our Gancelot support series. And finally, for the star of the show and one of my favorite cards now making his V Premium debut, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you one of my favorite cards from Royal Paladin ever, which is Holy Divine Knight Gancelot Peacesaver, who has the following effect of Auto Vanguard Circle. When it attacks a Vanguard, cost Counterblast 1. Search your deck for up to 1 Blaster Blade, call it to a front row rearguard circle, and that circle becomes a Vanguard circle until end of turn. Shuffle your deck. If you have Solitary Knight Gancelot in your soul, get 2 Imaginary Gift Force. Continuous Vanguard Circle / Rearguard Circle. All of your units with Blaster Blade in its card name cannot be affected by your opponent's cards and get power plus 3,000. This card is huge for the Gancelot strategy. Overall, it fixes everything about Gancelot and honestly should have been what Gancelot did in the past. So we're going to go ahead through this effect thoroughly and talk about everything that makes the deck so much better. I think the most important thing about Gancelot Peacesaver over everything, just to sum this card up, is the fact that this card improves the Gancelot strategy by giving it multi-attack, extra force markers, and protection to your Blaster Blade. When designing Gancelot Peacesaver and looking at a bunch of old cards in the past, what it did in the past, and Blaster Blade support from the past and today and what's wrong with the deck now, I realized that certain things and aspects of Gancelot that were good, I want to improve all of that while adding what makes some of the best decks right now in current V Premium meta even a lot better. So Gancelot Peacesaver now has multi-attack, you have extra force markers, you have a protection effect onto your Blaster Blades because they're key pieces, and the deck is good at any period in the game, whether it's your first grade 3 ride or it's in that mid to late game where the Gancelot deck usually will start excelling at. When designing Gancelot Peacesaver, I still wanted to have something to do with Solitary Knight Gancelot. I think that when you introduce any sort of evolution to something, I feel like it should always tie in with its previous variation. So I wanted to have Solitary Knight Gancelot have some relevancy into this deck when you play it, because I felt like that's just something that evolution unit should do. So having Solitary Knight Gancelot in your soul, which now ties back all the way into our Young Pegasus Knight, what I was discussing for and how Young Pegasus Knight will make the deck better, now just makes so much more sense on why you'd want to play that card with this deck. Getting those extra 2 force markers to apply that extra power onto your now 4 attack deck with Blaster Blade, who's going to come at your opponent with a critical and a drive check for a turn, is perfect. It makes your Blaster Blade scary, it improves your strategy, and you're going into a potentially 4 to 5 force marker turn, which honestly at this point in V Premium, I don't feel like that's broken because of how fast all the other decks are. Now we can discuss the second skill. So the original Holy Divine Knight Gancelot Peacesaver had an effect where, for my premium players, you'll know this, in the G zone, your Blaster Blades gain the restrict effect, which essentially means they can't be targeted by card effect. Because Blaster Blade is such a key unit and element in this deck, and Gancelot Peacesaver was a support card for the Alfred strategy back in the past, I feel like the second skill being Vanguard Circle and Rearguard Circle relevant is perfectly fine. I think that having it being usable and accessible to you during any point in the game, whether you're on Solitary Knight Gancelot, or if you're just playing a deck that likes Blaster Blade but you want a protection effect for it, having them to get through a resource and getting rid of this card first is perfectly good in that sense, as it ties back into what the card did originally in the past, and it makes this card accessible to any Blaster Blade deck that is viable in Premium. Holy Divine Knight Gancelot Peace Saver, Young Pegasus Knight, Blue Flame Knight DINAS are just the first taste of all these amazing new cards I have for my custom card series. I've worked very hard on this and I'm super excited to showcase you guys, but now I'm ready to see what you guys feel and think about this new custom card support. I'm very curious to see what other ideas you might have on how I can improve the Gancelot strategy, and what are the tweaks and ideas that I can also use to improve the original card designs of these cards to make it even better for the deck itself. I'm so excited to showcase the rest of this series to you guys. Next week, Monday, I will be showcasing my Shadow Paladin support for V Premium Witches in the following video. I'll see you soon, card fighters. Peace.